Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we bring you our top 10 managers who made glorious comebacks. 10. Rafa Benitez. We begin with a manager who's made a tradition of making unusual comebacks. Rafa Benitez made his name at Valencia, who he guided to a first La Liga title in 31 years in his first season, and then led a Spanish revolution at Liverpool, signing the likes of Xabi Alonso and taking the club to a historic 5th Champions League, again in his first season. It seemed that Rafa could do no wrong, but after leaving Liverpool, having not been able to secure that elusive league title, Benitez encountered difficulties, embarking on a doomed spell in charge of European champions Inter Milan, who sacked him before Christmas. By 2012, Rafa made the brave decision to return to management at Chelsea, who were also European champions at the time. In spite of the abuse hurled at him from the Stamford Bridge crowds he'd once been the enemy of, Benitez brought home the Europa League. And in 2016, the Spanish manager returned to England once again to rebuild his reputation. He took over at relegation-doomed Newcastle just months after losing his job at Real Madrid, and although he couldn't beat the drop, has got the Magpies reinstated at the first attempt and has restored pride on Tyneside. 9. Kenny Dalglish. Next up, we have a hero's return. Kenny Dalglish made himself a legend on and off the field for Liverpool, scoring 169 goals for them as a player and then leading them to 3 league titles as player-manager in the 1980s. But Dalglish left the club in 1991, holding a fantastic record but still reeling from the Hazel and Hillsborough tragedies. 20 years later, King Kenny returned to the Anfield dugout, with the club in a post-Benitez mini-crisis following the failures of the club's previous owners and Roy Hodgson. As Merseyside rejoiced, Dalglish got the Reds performing again, leading them to the League Cup in 2012, their first silverware in 6 years. But the former Scottish international also encountered controversy, as he got himself on the wrong side of the Suarez-Evra saga and was let go after finishing 8th. However, he still remains the last manager to win the league with the Reds. 8. Ernesto Valverde. Like Dalglish at Liverpool, Ernesto Valverde is considered something of a god at Athletic Bilbao, and his legendary status was cemented when he returned to the club in 2013. Valverde, affectionately known as Ants during his playing days at the San Mamés, learned his trade as a manager with Bilbao's B team, before taking the full reins of the club in 2003. And leading them to a respectable 5th place finish in La Liga. But after impressive spells at Espanyol and Olympiacos among others, Valverde came back to the Basque country even stronger in 2013, and presided over Athletic's highest ever La Liga points tally as they finished 4th. In 2015, he led the club to the Copa del Rey final, where they lost to Barcelona, before exacting revenge in the Super Cup by sweeping Luis Enrique's team aside 5-1 on aggregate, giving the club their first silverware in 31 years. 7. Louis van Gaal. The entertaining Louis van Gaal certainly divided opinions during his time in Manchester, but his return to the Dutch national team in 2012 was nothing short of heroic. After finishing bottom of their group in Euro 2012 with 0 points, the Netherlands were in dire straits. Bert van Marwijk's second-place finish in the 2010 World Cup seemed like a distant memory, and it was made even worse due to the fact that this was a Dutch side with Robben, Sneijder, Van Persie and Van der Vaart at the peak of their powers. The Clockwork Orange certainly needed their own Alex de Lager to ruffle a few feathers, and Louis van Gaal was their man. It proved to be the right appointment, as the team went unbeaten in the qualifiers with a goal difference of +29. This was in stark contrast to his first stint as Netherlands manager, where he failed to qualify for the 2002 World Cup. And despite the low expectations, the Orange started the 2014 tournament on fire, obliterating champions Spain 5-1 and went on to top their group after winning all 3 games. They brushed aside Mexico in the round of 16 and narrowly got past Costa Rica in the quarters, where Van Gaal's eccentricity reached unparalleled heights as he replaced goalkeeper Jasper Cillessen for the penalty shootout. They eventually succumbed to Argentina in the semis, but they did pick up a very respectable 3rd place after beating host Brazil 3-0. Van Gaal did a terrific job, and his departure still affects the Orange to this day, with poor showings from Gus Hiddink and Danny Blind leaving the side on the brink of not qualifying for 2 major tournaments in a row. 6. Ottmar Hitzfeld. One of Germany's most highly decorated managers, Ottmar Hitzfeld is perhaps remembered most warmly by Bayern Munich fans. Following 2 league titles and a Champions League victory with Borussia Dortmund in the 90s, the Bavarians came swooping in, as is tradition. And Hitzfeld was magnificent in Munich, leading the side to a Champions League, 2 German Cups and 4 Bundesligas in just 6 years, but was sacked after a trophyless season in 2004. By 2007 though, the club were in crisis, having finished in their lowest league position in 12 years. Cometh the hour, cometh the man, and Hitzfeld knew exactly what was needed. He revamped the squad, buying the likes of Franck Ribéry and Luca Toni, and promoted Toni Kroos from the youth team. Bayern won the domestic treble, and Hitzfeld left the club on his own accord this time, having set them on the way to years of success. 5. Harry Redknapp. Whatever your opinion of Harry Redknapp as a manager, you can't deny he's shown the ability to work wonders at some of the clubs he's managed. While serving as Portsmouth's director of football in 2002, he replaced Graham Rix as manager with the club in a relegation battle in Division 1. The next season, Redknapp masterminded the club's promotion to the Premier League, losing just 6 games all season as Pompey re-entered the top flight for the first time since their 1950s heyday. But less than 2 years later, Redknapp did the unthinkable and left for fierce rival Southampton. Unlike at Pompey though, he could not keep the Saints up, and with his old employers back in relegation trouble in 2005, he returned. With the help of the talismanic Pedro Mendes, he kept them up, and by 2008 Redknapp had led the South Coasters to their highest top-flight finish in over 50 years and a first FA Cup since the Second World War. 4. Claudio Ranieri. In at 4, we have a comeback which took some time to happen. Claudio Ranieri originally arrived in England back in 2000 and held the reins at Chelsea for 4 years. Although he brought Frank Lampard to Stamford Bridge and reared the side to the Champions League semis with Abramovich's riches, Ranieri was replaced by Jose Mourinho in 2004 and carried on his run of managing top sides in Europe such as Valencia and Inter Milan while failing to win a single league title. The Tinkerman was unsurprisingly ridiculed over the years, and none other than Mourinho put it more bluntly than anyone, simply stating he's old and hasn't won anything. Brutal. But Ranieri would get the last laugh. After returning to England in 2015, the Italian not only took Leicester to the Premier League title against 5,000 to 1 odds, but also managed to beat Mourinho's hapless Chelsea on the way, after which the Portuguese coach was sacked. 3. Jose Mourinho. But Mourinho's return to Chelsea wasn't all doom and gloom. As we all know, the so-called special one had a magical time in his first spell at Stamford Bridge, winning successive Premier League titles and promptly becoming the most decorated manager in the club's history. But amid disputes with owner Roman Abramovich, Mourinho made a shock exit from the club in 2007 and went on to pursue more silverware in Italy and Spain. A return to the Bridge always seemed inevitable, and by 2013, the Portuguese was back in West London, declaring himself the happy one. And was it for good this time? It certainly seemed that way, as Mourinho took the Blues to the Champions League semis in his first season, before bringing in the likes of Cesc Fabregas and Diego Costa and storming to the title in 2015. But alas, things fell apart even more dramatically this time, and with the club in relegation form, Mourinho was out the door before the end of the year. By the following season, he was at the helm of rivals Manchester United, making another comeback highly unlikely. 2. Brian Clough. Another manager who turned falling out with his superiors into an art form, Brian Clough dramatically fell from grace and then rose from the ashes triumphantly, all in the space of a few seasons. Cloughy performed miracles at Derby County, taking over a club rooted to the bottom of the English Second Division in 1968 and winning them a first ever English League title just 4 years later in 1972. That's when the problems started. Clough and his assistant Peter Taylor had already resigned during that title run-in and looked set to be heading to Coventry before the deal fell through. But even after the title win, Clough had multiple fallings out with chairman Sam Longson, and the situation got even worse as Clough spent record money on transfers without Longson's consent, called Juventus cheating bastards after getting knocked out of the European Cup, and pissed off just about anyone it was possible to piss off. He eventually resigned for good in October 1973 and moved on to Brighton and then Leeds, where he was famously sacked after just 6 miserable games. but Clough was just warming up. 4 months later, he took over Derby's arch-rivals Nottingham Forest, who were mid-table in the second division, and did an even better job than at the Rams, turning Forest into English and European champions. He ended up staying at the City ground for 18 years, managing a total of 994 games. 1. Vicente del Bosque. But the ultimate managerial comeback has to be Vicente del Bosque. A Madridista through and through, the Spaniard won 5 La Ligas and 4 Copas del Rey as a player during the 1970s and 80s, and returned to the Bernabeu to manage the B team just 3 years following his retirement. Del Bosque was a key member of the Real Madrid coaching staff for a number of years, and was eventually promoted to the manager's role on a permanent basis in 1999. His appointment had an instant impact, as Los Blancos stormed to victory in the Champions League, lifting the trophy for just the second time since the 1960s. Over the next 3 seasons, Del Bosque would add another Champions League and 2 La Liga titles to Real's brimming trophy cabinet. But just one day after another successful season in 2003, the club decided not to renew his contract, and insultingly offered him the technical director's position instead, later voicing concerns over the manager's health. Del Bosque then spent an unhappy season at Besiktas before taking an indefinite break from the beautiful game. But in 2008, he took up the head coach's role for Spain and spent 8 glorious years managing La Furia Roca. In 2010, he helped the national side win its first ever World Cup, and 2 years later led them to a second successive European Championship, cementing his place as one of the most successful managers in football history.
So we hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to check out more of our videos, then click here on screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and get on our Snapchat and our Twitter. I don't know what I'm saying.